Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of ClueCon Weekly. I am your host, Jon Gray, and today we have accessibility subject matter expert at GitHub as a contractor, Erissa Duvall. Erissa, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Good, good. Well, for some of us meeting you for the first time, can you give us a little snapshot of who you are and the work that you're doing over at GitHub?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a Louisville, Kentucky native who uh, I used to work at the American Printing House for the Blind. That's kind of where I initially got into accessibility, and
Cool.
it's one of those things that just kind of ballooned from there into from like casual interest to now it's something I speak at conferences multiple times a year about and is my main career focus. With GitHub in particular, currently I assist with their accessibility program with sort of compliance and governance. So, kind of overseeing, like, I guess almost like as a project manager in a way, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of overseeing, like, looking at testing results for different services, making sure things are being tested on a regular basis, and sort of uh, doing different categorizations and like analytics to sort of like help
Mm-hmm.
gauge sort of how are we doing on different areas of accessibility. Are we seeing an uptick in like user feedback issues versus like things that just the accessibility auditors are finding, hopefully before they ever actually make it to the user, or at least like getting it fixed after it gets out there if it doesn't get fixed beforehand. um,
Nice.
and kind of also as sort of like an educational aspect to it, because a lot of times it's one of those things that um, people don't necessarily realize what all things kind of
Mm-hmm.
are included in accessibility. And so I'm sort of there to sort of act as a go-between like the developers and the testers, kind of clarifying things as needed or helping them find solutions, because I do have some while I am not explicitly a like developer at all, I do have like some development background, so I kind of can translate, I guess, between the two,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like help them
No,
put it
yeah,
in
we're gonna
language
put
they
those
understand.
skills we're gonna put those skills to use today for sure. Well, it sounds like very rewarding work,
Mhm.
which is and it's something that I and probably a lot of our audience is not very well versed in. So can you just give us a little glimpse on where we are at in the mission to kind of make all of tech possible to everybody?
It's one of those things where it's kind of all over the place in a way, because like we've got a lot of great regulations out there. There's a lot of great guidelines from like the W3C's web content accessibility guidelines, which you'll
Mm-hmm.
frequently hear people call WCAG. And those are kind of like, in a way, WCAG is sort of like the foundation for a lot of the regulations that you'll see out there and a lot of
Okay.
like company policies on accessibility. Especially because it's it's very well, it's for web content, but a lot of the things that are in it can be applied to a lot of different areas or can influence a lot of that. Um, and then there, of course, there's also things like ADA and Section 508 here in the US that cover the digital as well as, well, I think Section 508 is just the technical side, but there is like under the um shoot, I was trying to remember like what the, because Section 508 is like the section of another regulation. But anyhow, there are those regulations also that handle like physical space
Yeah.
accessibility. And sometimes the two kind of overlap a little even. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of it is like implementing it and actually holding places accountable and getting more consistency with it, because that's something we see a lot of, is there's just not a lot of consistency. um Sometimes that's just because people are unaware of maybe that they're not being accessible. Um, Sometimes it's a matter of, like, you've got upper levels that you've got to try to get to that buy-in for them to understand why it needs to be, like, why there needs to be actual policies to like encourage and to help keep things on track. Especially
Mm-hmm.
because it's not like a one and done thing. It's not something where you can do like a one test through and fix all the accessibility issues.
Yeah.
It's always gonna be this ongoing process. If for nothing else, then we're always finding ways to do things better, or we're
Mm-hmm.
realizing things that we thought maybe were accessible, we're realizing, oh wait, this actually creates this barrier for this other group. How can we, resolve that? Um,
Yeah. And
so yeah.
I kind of liked where you said that it's not just one checkbox and then you're totally good, because accessibility can kind of seem a little daunting at first just because people don't really know where to start. And it's kind of like a do it all or do none of it kind of thing, possibly. So, like, what are some small or practical steps that people can take in their accessibility journey or in their journey to try to make their site or their application, their service a little bit more accessible to everybody?
I think for one, like there's a lot of different resources out there. Like there's so many free resources and tools out there.
Uh-huh.
The W3C, and while they don't necessarily always have a positive image currently, the Department of Homeland Security, surprisingly, is actually the one that is over the Section 508 Trusted Tester certification. And it's a free
Mm,
certification that people can actually get that covers like digital accessibility. And then they even have courses for like procurement and things like that. And a lot of like having those kinds of courses, even if you're not going as far as to get like a formal certification for it, just that awareness, building that basic awareness can be like so powerful in like helping you get started. Another
mhm,
thing I like to do is that there's a lot of like accessibility empathy or etiquette videos out there. And a lot of those, especially if you get the ones that are explicitly like by individuals within the disability community, that can actually like really kind of expand like your ability to just be able to like see when something might be an issue. Because it's one of those
mhm.
things, if you're not personally like living in the body of someone else, you're not necessarily going to be as aware of the things around you that can cause a barrier to someone
Yeah,
that it
definitely.
does.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess too, like another thing I love to do is, and this kind of goes back to the community, because just getting involved with the disability community can be such an eye-opening thing. I mean, that's basically essentially like how I got involved. Because when I worked at
Mhm,
the printing house for the blind, I was just by nature of the business that I was working in, I was supporting a larger percentage of users who had, whether it be mobility, cognitive, visual, different like disabilities impacting their day-to-day lives, and getting to like just actually like have to like help support all that. It really like, oh, this actually is really a problem that's something that needs to be done about. But I
mhm.
also got to see those light bulb moments when I would help someone else kinda see how to fix something, and it then be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's actually kinda cool. Let's
Yeah.
do that." Um, but I also like to follow there's a lot of great Reddit communities, or, there can be local organizations, like, getting involved with those can sometimes help to, because again, it's getting that initial awareness is probably the biggest thing, like, blocking people from really starting that journey.
Mhm. No, I like how you mentioned seeing the end user and, being able to give them, I don't wanna say give them accessibility, but put things in their fingertips, making it, accessible and available to everybody.
Well, and it's
Do
one
you
of
have
those
any
things.
example?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just gonna ask if you had an example of what changes or what tweaks maybe you were able to make that had kind of a large impact, on the community or on the work that you were doing.
Probably the my all-time favorite example would be, uh, when I worked at the printing house for the blind, we had an incident where we had, like, old big office copiers and printers like any company does, and we were updating them to some new ones. And the new ones we got were pretty awesome overall, like, a lot of them you could have, like, built-in screen readers on them and all kinds of, like, voice commands and stuff like that, anything that would, like, make it easier for, like, the users to use regardless. And, we had an incident though where, because one of the copiers was in the design department, the designers wanted a color matching tool on it. But that tool caused the printer to try to install a very specific default print driver that was hot garbage, to say the least. Like it was pretty.
Yeah.
That was all it had going for it. Um, it wasn't even really all that intuitive, sadly, but it was made by like a third party company, not the main copier company. And I I spent probably a good like month and a half almost trying and trying and fighting with different, because I initially got like directed to the third party companies like support and was just getting nowhere with it. And I finally got sent back to the main copier company. I'm like, look, they're basically throwing up their hands and saying they can't help me. And the worst part about it is uh and this partially kind of comes down to like, you have the instances where you can tell someone didn't actually read your email when they
Yeah.
respond. Um because I explicitly made sure to point out in my emails, I'm like, the reason that this is a problem is because nothing is programmatically like labeled as what it is, or like where it will have the information connected to it that it should.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, a screen reader would go through it and all you would hear was like context menu, context menu, context menu, no labeling, no
Yeah.
current values, nothing. And so I would explicitly say, I'm like, this is a matter of like, these users are using screen readers. And in a few of the cases, they have no functional sight. Because we had a few in that area, we had a few people that were non-circadian, where they don't, that again, like they have no functional sight, so they can't perceive light levels, hence the non-circadian
Yeah.
term that's frequently used. Uh, and they would shoot back a response of, "Oh, well, they can tab 3 times and they'll see this button highlighted." And I'm like, "The what? Read that back, please."
Yeah.
Um, but I finally, like, got a hold of this one tech at the main copier company. I was like, "Hey, here's the thing. If you can, install this driver that I'm having problems with and use either the built-in screen reader on your computer, because every computer basically usually has, like, if it's Windows or Mac at least, it'll have a built-in screen reader in the form of voiceover or narrator. Or I tried to ask if, like, they could install, NVDA, which is like a free screen reader, that's open
Mm-hmm.
source, and it's actually maintained by individuals within the disability community. Um, but I was like, that, or install that one and just navigate through it with like tab, space, like real basic keyboard keys, no mouse, just the keyboard, and just listen. Don't focus on what it looks like. Just listen to what's said and see if like you could actually hear that read back to you and it makes sense.
Yeah.
And that tech called me back like an hour later and he was like, "Oh, that was so horrible." He was
Yeah.
like, "Here, I've got you the driver that'll work, but I just wanted to tell you thank you, because like that was like so," it was getting him just to like have that experience.
Uh-huh.
Like, and so one of the things I always like I pushed for a lot when within like the IT department in general, where I was at the printing house, and I've done it at other places too, like when I worked at CVS and other places, is like encouraging people, even if they don't have a disability necessarily, like, because I mean, even people with like a medical condition don't necessarily see themselves as disabled, and you don't have to have a medical condition to necessarily be disabled by the environment
Mm-hmm.
around you. But like I would encourage people to like just get like a basic understanding of like different kinds of assistive technologies, or especially screen readers, because that tends to be one that like people, if they're just thrown at it, it's overwhelming. But like I've encouraged that. I've encouraged like trying to make those kinds of things more widely available when I can, because just getting that experience of like what it's like to use that, what it's
Yeah.
like to have to experience the world. You're never gonna, unless I actually go like blind, I'm not gonna have any real true. At least I wouldn't feel comfortable saying I would have a true understanding of what it's like to live blind.
Exactly.
But just having like some awareness of that heck, I mean, it's even helped me out sometimes, like, in my day-to-day life because, like, I'm not a daily screen reader user, but I understand the basic how-tos of using a screen reader, and so I've had times where, for instance, I'll be in a doctor's appointment. I'll go to the optometrist and they'll dilate my eyes, and of course, once they dilate your eyes, you can't see
See very well,
anything.
yeah.
You're, like, holding, like, your phone way out trying to see if you can read
Mhm.
it or whatever, and I'll just sit there and turn on talk back on my phone, and I'll just be sitting there not even looking at my phone, and I'll just be like and I've had people look over at me and be so confused about what I'm doing, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm just using my phone, like, it's a screen reader. I know how to use it, so
Exactly.
it works." I'm
Yeah.
not permanently without my sight, but at least for that, like, 30 minutes to an hour that I'm not able to see as well, I can still function. Uh
Mhm.
And that's, like, such a valuable skill. I mean, now if I do lose my sight, I'm gonna hopefully have a easier time, like, acclimating to certain aspects of it
Yeah.
than I would
So
otherwise.
yeah, and when you mentioned that you were kind of able to put the developer or the technical support person
Mhm,
with the printer in the shoes of the user and kind of
mhm.
have them see through their lens, that kind of jived because I was thinking like how we could make accessibility testing integrated in some
Yeah,
of the development processes more further on rather than before they become like a hazard.
yeah.
So obviously, you could call each tech person and have them impersonate each type of disability and see if that would work, but that would take a lot of time and a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of development. So, are there any tools that people can use, or maybe just mindsets? Like, how do we make accessibility testing more of preemptive rather than an afterthought?
I think the easiest thing is, like part of the reason I follow a lot of the, like, disability, like, subreddits and things like that on Reddit is it just gives me an idea. I can see the kind of complaints that people are, like, have about, like, whatever applications, storefronts, whatever that they're using,
Uh-huh.
and kinda be aware of that. Because again, building that awareness of, like, what's going on, what's causing a problem that I might not necessarily know. Or, you know, including that feedback early on, like, when you're doing the design work, trying to, like,
Uh-huh.
reach out to members of different areas of the disability community, just like you would with any other user feedback session, but, more of a
Yeah.
focus on, like, those specific sort of things to get those ideas, reaching out to your colleagues. Frequently people don't necessarily think that they're working with individuals who have a disability, but there's a good chance they are. I mean, it's something like 1 in 4 or something people that have some form of disability, and honestly, it's probably higher than that since not everything is impacting someone all the time, so they may not officially recognize themselves as having a
Yeah.
disability when in reality
Exactly.
it's there. Um, and having those conversations just as early as you can. Don't wait until you've already started building something and then start asking those questions and having those discussions. One thing I used to do when I was at, for instance, CVS Health is we would actually have like design reviews. So we'd have like like maybe a Figma mock up or something like that, and we would just go through and discuss like what are things that, based on our own experiences that we've had, like doing accessibility testing, hearing user feedback, that we want to be mindful of.
Uh-huh.
Maybe like certain things like ensuring like the structure, like all that the heading levels actually make sense and that we're actually using headings where it's appropriate. Where you want to make sure that you're using like links versus buttons because they're not as interchangeable as people sometimes
Uh-huh.
think that
Yeah.
they would be. Um, I mean, it's a lot of it, like I said, is having those like discussions, or also like I mentioned like the screen reader thing. You know, encouraging your developers, your designers, and such to actually have like either use the built-in screen reader on their computer at the very least, or actually use like NVDA, JAWS, narrator, voiceover. There's a whole bunch of them out there, but like using those different assistive technologies where it's possible. Just because like sometimes that's just they can go through it and they're not necessarily going to be using it the same way that someone who is a day-to-day user of the screen reader would be using it.
Mhm.
Because it's like I can do testing all day, and I can use a screen reader, but my site's always gonna slightly be there, like, I'm gonna be slightly taking that feedback regardless of, like, how much I try to, like, cut it out, but,
Yeah.
uh and then, of course, like, there's I mentioned, like, some of the different, like, free courses and stuff that are out there, like, encouraging your designers and your developers to, like, just go through some of those different things, just so that they're aware, like,
Mhm.
and encouraging them to, like, regularly kind of, like, maybe revisit those things so that because it's I mean, it's one of those things, if you're not dealing with it every single day, you're not necessarily gonna recall it as well
Definitely.
as if you were regularly reviewing it and kind of having it at the back of your mind. I mean, it's kind of like, we most companies have like an annual like sexual harassment like lesson that you have to like watch or whatnot. It's kind of the same thing as that. You're doing that because it's to keep it in the back of your mind so you're not completely forgetting it. You're
Mhm.
kind of being reminded about it a little.
Yeah.
Um and
Just keeping it top
yeah,
of mind. I like that.
exactly.
I was curious what AI tools or what AI has kind of done to shift the landscape, either making it a little bit better or shaking it up. What is kind of your take, and what tools are kind of out there that are helping or hurting the accessibility landscape?
I mean, it's kind of a mix because it's one of those things that tech is only going to be as good as the people that make it, and people aren't perfect.
Uh huh.
So the tech's not going to be perfect. And,
Exactly.
we see that, AI can have like the hallucinations and such where you see the people that like they'll use AI to code an entire like application
Mm-hmm.
and then they realize that it's like calling node packages that don't actually exist. Um And you
Oh
can see
yeah.
that even in accessibility, like, you can see that, and so there has to be that, like, trust but verify or, like, don't just completely take it at face value, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people can be a little overconfident in the results of, like, their AI tools. You see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite thing I like to do in, like, some of the talks I do is uh, I have like an example website where it's the same exact website, looks exactly the same at face value, same content, and I've got two different versions of it, or three different versions of it. The first one, it is actually like decently accessible. The second one is just like I'm not using any of the like best practices and such that I should be using. Like it still looks the same, but, like, I'm not using heading levels, I don't have, like, an actual appropriate alt attribute on images, things like that. And
Yeah.
then I've got a third one that same content, 0 CSS styling, so it's just, like, linear content,
Yeah.
and all 3 of them can pass, like, an AI accessibility test. If I, like, send them through, like, accessibility insights, Axe Dev Tools, anything like that, they all three will score 100%, but only one
Mm-hmm.
of them is actually accessible. So I think that's
Interesting.
kind of the thing. Like I always like tell people like I totally get using automation. I totally get using AI, but use it to give you an idea. Don't 100% like depend on it.
Yeah.
Um, That said, I mean, again, there are tons of amazing tools out there. I mentioned, Axe Dev Tools, which I think now has some AI aspects to it. Of course, there's Copilot that people can use, or
Mm-hmm.
Gemini for like a lot of the Google based applications. Um, GitHub recently introduced a tool that you can add to a repo. It's an accessibility scanner, and what it does, and it's open source too,
Yeah.
just to kind of add. Um, but what it does is it goes through and it sort of tries to find possible accessibility issues, and it'll actually go in and it'll create like GitHub issues for each one of the things that it finds. And it'll even try to do it if it thinks it can, I guess it'll try to do a PR to like fix the issue as well
Mm.
and link it to the issue. So it's
Neat.
really cool. But I mean,
Yeah.
even then, I always say, like it's one of those things like you don't don't just merge in. You don't want to just like assume that it's completely correct on that PR and just merge
Yeah,
it in. You always like look at the issue, see if it actually is a valid issue because any of those tools can give you a false positive. Um, so you just want to make sure because otherwise, if you just take it at face value, well, now you're making more work for yourself rather than saving yourself time. And
exactly.
then, of course, like, looking at any solution that they give you, you want to make sure does it actually function the way that it should?
Mhm.
Does it actually have the information? Um, Probably the biggest one that I've seen cause problems, and this one can be a little bit of a dicey topic. Most accessibility professionals will probably agree more so with like what I'm about to say. The companies that make these tools will very, very much like not agree.
Mhm.
But accessibility overlays, a lot of those use AI now and are trying to use more and more of it. And for those who don't know, an accessibility overlay, you've probably seen one, maybe even multiple times a day. It'll usually be like a little icon in like the bottom corner of the page. That'll like have like a little like person in it. It might be like the handicap symbol that you see like on a parking placard, or it might
Yeah.
just be like a little stick figure person or whatever. But you click it and it'll open up like the big little panel that has like screen readers and all kinds of like different accessibility settings.
Yeah.
Um, they're just not great. Because I mean, for one,
Mm.
a lot of the things that they do, it's stuff that someone who has need of that probably already has their own tool that they're just using across all the sites they visit.
Yeah.
And so if that tool, like if the overlay on like one website like conflicts with their tool, well, now they gotta turn off
Interesting.
their tool to then use your tool just for your site. Then they gotta turn it back on when they leave, whereas, they already had something that was working for them. A lot of them, 'em, they're not keyboard accessible, which can be a lot of a problem, for people that have different mobility or even, like, cognitive or visual, but, you see it a lot more with, like, the visual, uh, people that'll just use, like, only a keyboard.
Yeah.
Um, so automatically, you're causing a problem there. And it's kind of one of those things too where the way I've described it to people is it's like improperly treating a wound that you have. Say you have a wound on your arm or something that it needs stitches. Like that's the only way it's going to heal properly. And instead you just like stick a pretty like unicorn band-aid on the top of it.
Mhm.
Okay,
Which we
well,
all have, yeah.
yeah. It'll look nice. It'll kinda hide it for a little bit, but you're not
Mhm.
actually treating the underlying issue, and in fact, you might just be allowing it to get worse. So in a way, sometimes it can make you complacent. It can be more of, like, virtue signaling, like you're
Yeah.
making it look like you're trying to be accessible when in reality you're not actually
Yeah.
fixing anything.
You're just
Uh,
causing more harm, it sounds
yeah,
like. Yeah.
and instead you'd be better off, like, just fixing the underlying issues, especially because
Mhm.
a lot of times it's not as difficult as people think it would be to actually, like, make something accessible.
Yeah. No, that's very neat.
Mhm.
Well, Arissa, this has been a very eye-opening conversation. You've opened the world, to us a lot. Is there anything I've yet to ask you about or anything you wanna shout out or plug before we wrap this up?
Um, well, like I said, the accessibility scanner that's now open source on GitHub, I would definitely encourage people to check that out.
Mhm.
I got to be there when they made it open source, so that was really awesome to get to see.
Neat. Cool.
It's a awesome tool. Um, and of course, also, I've got a ton of resources, like free courses and stuff like that, listed on the accessibility page of my corgidev.com site. Because, like, it's one of those things, there's so many amazing free tools and resources out there that can help people get started or, like, with building on accessibility initiatives they may already have. So I highly recommend people check that out. I try to, like, if nothing else, direct people to different places where they can find more. So, yeah.
Cool. Very neat. Well, you're doing some very powerful, impacting stuff. It's very rewarding, and it's nice to see people using their tech skills to make the world a better place. So, Erissa, thank you for the conversation and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me be here today.
Of course.